I'm officially kicking it off. So we have Rob here from Genius Token. So if you guys go in right now and look at the chart will read Jenny Trust. So if you guys are unfamiliar with why that might be, as I touched on in my initial write-up, they actually launched back last year in April 2021, and it's been quite exciting to see the progression of the development and Rob's vision in that time. So I know from a chart perspective, things were pretty stable from a growth standpoint until a couple of weeks ago, where, as I mentioned, a couple of other things in the market from a stability standpoint have kind of shifted. And I do see with the hard work, the dedication, the community that you guys are starting to build at your core, that really believe in what you're putting forth. And anybody who's jumped in the Telegram channel can get a feel for the vibe that you guys have going on in there. It's awesome. It's very positive, and you guys are just waiting for the future. And that's the right type of feel to have in a project like this. So for me, it's just really refreshing considering all the negativity you might see in the space right now. So I didn't want to jump into as much on the technical side as I might typically in an introduction, just because the core
Yeah,
dynamic of this is so unique. And I wanted to save that kind of for you, Rob. But I wanted to highlight some of the factors and indicators about the project that really get me excited in the long term. So I'm going to throw it over to you a little bit earlier than I typically would. And I'd really love to have you jump deep into your background, because one, I chatted with Digital after he told me kind of some of the ideas you have, and some of the things you've seen in the space, how long you've been involved in crypto as a whole, and some of the transitions and trends and changes you've seen and been a part of. It just, as somebody who's definitely newer to the space and really preaches education, that is something that is invaluable, I think, in crypto. So I wanted to start there, and we
thank
can
you.
transition to the project details kind of from that start point.
Thank you. Thanks for having Maurice. Having me, Maurice. I really appreciate it. My name is Robert Janito. Hello, everybody. I've been in crypto for almost 12 years. First heard about it when I was first heard about it from some vulnerability researchers when I was working with a cyber warfare company called Endgame Systems in Atlanta. And I maybe within 6 months there, at the beginning of 2011, I started mining for Bitcoin, and that's when a lot of it made a ton of sense. Since there, I went crazy with mining. Got about not about, but I got four mining rigs. Sorry, not mining rigs. Four mining centers ended up coming from that up until 2016. So I was mining for quite a while and helping other people get better position with mining, cheaper electricity. Um, and since since like mid 2013, started like doing crypto completely full time, um, and working with other businesses, co-founding my own business in crypto, really focusing on starting to focus more on growing the crypto ecosystem rather than mining. And I've been involved in almost every corner of the cryptocurrency world. And one of my philosophies when I talk with people is to try to use their language. Like, yes, I have a background in software development, but it doesn't help people if I speak software development terms. One of my biggest hobbies and other backgrounds has to do with the health and medical world, but as you find many times, using that language doesn't help. So I really like to speak in layman's terms as much as possible. So in the crypto worlds, I've served as a technology officer and mostly as a executive officer. Started a one of the USA's first marketplaces. It was called Wall of Coins, and it later got sold to a Chinese company. Um, the uh, and from there, I worked with multiple cryptocurrencies in 2016, 2017, 2018 to help them grow their ecosystems. One of them was Dash, the Dash core group. Some people may know of it long, long ago as Darkcoin. Dash is the only cryptocurrency that's instantly settled and guaranteed, better security than Bitcoin. But but myself, I worked with the Dash core group, um, not as employment, but sort of like partnership, and brought our companies together and helped Dash get to number three in the coin market cap charts. Number three from they may have been in the high 30s then, but all the way up to number three, and that was huge. I worked with Bitfinex to get Dash onto Bitfinex, the largest exchange at the time, and this greatly attracted the attention of Kraken, an exchange company that was always trying to scalp employees from my company, and we were scalping employees from their company, and vice versa. That's a little bit of my background. There actually is a lot more background to that because I've lived, eaten, and breathed everything crypto for almost 12 years now.
I mean,
I'm
like for
happy to
me,
share
this
my
is
experience with you all.
yeah, for me, I'd love to understand kind of what led you to want to pursue a, a smart contract such in the way that you did. Is there like a prior project or something you were involved with where
Well,
it kind of stemmed the idea, or what really kickstarted the Genius token, I guess, brand and idea?
sure.
Because it's very unique, just being a placeholder and then
Yeah.
transitioning after a year of running. It's really cool, right?
Yeah, I'd say eventually, 'cause, I mean, I've spoken at much length to many influencers and big people in the cryptocurrency world. Charlie Shrem, Eric Voorhees, Roger Ver, um, Vitalik Buterin and I used to talk a ton, which actually I was very frustrated about because he would only speak with me in Mandarin Chinese. I used to be very fluent in Mandarin Chinese. I haven't really spoken it. I think the last real conversation I had, besides some uh, Chinese strangers on the streets, was with Vitalik. I knew Anthony Diorio personally, who is one of the main founders for Ethereum, and to my surprise, convinced him to move like 5 minutes from me. I didn't think he was that serious. So in the Dash Core group, of course, the CEO at the time, Ryan Taylor, was very close to him. So with having many of these conversations with people who had seen many different points of views of what's going on in the crypto world, um, eventually with Dash cryptocurrency and Steam's what is it called? Sort of like a blockchain version of medium.com. I started thinking a lot about store of value, and Steam got me really interested in this, like accidentally, because Steam's blockchain rewards depended a lot on human attention, and to mine for blockchain rewards, all you really needed was your human attention and to do something creative, to post things. So about then, I think that was like early 2017. I started thinking a lot about the fact that Bitcoin is programmable money and all these other monies were programmable money. And I just kept thinking, well, hold on a second. We can create and test and make mistakes and create prototypes. We can create our own store of value. Anybody can create their own store of value. And I thought, well, if we can create our own store of value, can't we create it with the whole purpose to only grow in value over time? If we can program this stuff, can't we program it to do what everybody wants in the first place? Can't we make a store of value that is designed to be scarce, valuable, and appreciate in value over time, or appreciate in value? So I started thinking about this a lot in 2017. I wrote about 5 articles on the future of money, and I mean those were a bit abstract, but so I thought about this for quite a while. And about 2 years ago, and this is where the name Jenna Trust comes in, that you had accidentally grabbed from the ERC20 for Legacy Genius. I was working with a savings company that I had co-founded, and the savings company was all focused on storing value for people and appreciating it as much as possible. Now, this wasn't with crypto; this was with traditional finance, and it was, of course, extremely influenced by crypto. So, so about 2 years ago, I really started personally getting very serious about this and having talks with multiple people. This led me to find people who were at the forefront of tokenomics and learned about Hex, studied the Hex out of Hex. Had many chats with Richard Hart, and yeah, that's where this stuff really started about 2 years ago, and then a year, 3 months ago, first launch. I could talk a
Terrific.
lot about this,
Okay.
by the way.
Yeah, no, and I'm hoping that you maybe just go into a little bit more detail. I did want to cut you off, but I know from chatting with Digital, him and I were saying that the more we can have you kind of push into your background, that for people to understand you have the expertise and the know-how on that side of things. I think that will, I saw an interesting survey on an analytics site I follow on Twitter, and they were talking about during a down market, the most important things, and they did it percentage wise. I mean, obviously people can vote for multiple things, but founder or team strength was like number three at like 66%. The strength, the number one was still community. Number two was the actual like product, or like the availability of like a utility, like something that's not just, oh, it's coming in 6 months. If it's something that they can use, that's obviously very important. And then founder, so like somebody like yourself was the third most important on the list. So I'm hoping that we could kind of just spend more time on your background, and I think that will really allow
Cool.
people to understand the feasibility and how this can actually grow long term.
Ever since I was a little kid, yeah, I was programming at the age of 13, like C and then C++ and assembly language and all that stuff. And I just wanted to make video games. I just wanted to make like the new Mortal Kombat and make my own finishing moves and stuff. And so I learned a lot from that. But so today, and with the cryptocurrency world, it's really allowed me to exercise that creativity and make games, really make game theory. And that's what a lot of these cryptocurrencies are. They're like financial like games, but they have a financial incentive, right? I have a background in programming, um, uh, not not just like software design, but the entire step of software, like the from beginning all the way to end and launch and maintaining that. And the last company that I like had a full time job for, that wasn't like a C level position, uh, was it was like an advertising company, so they had like real like massive scale of users, and insane hardware to support that. So when it comes to technology, been all over like system engineering, and that whole area, right? But ultimately, I'm a creative person. I'm not. Um, a lot of my desire and my passion has a lot to do with creating and creativity and game design is one of those things where so not a lot of people are familiar with game design and development, but to speak to people who aren't familiar, one thing to know is when you're first learning about like game design and development and how things happen, like in the video game world, how they're implemented, one of the first thoughts I remember having is wow, that's how you have this like main menu in this video game, and you move like your cursor down to a different option, like, or wow, this is how you make your own fonts, or wow, this is how you center your font in the middle of the screen. These people are crazy. How do they even think about how to implement something like this? This is really like out there thinking. And yes, the last 10, 11 years, 12 years, um, I've spent analyzing Bitcoin, and analyzing the finances behind it, the tokenomics behind it. Uh, Ethereum, which really had none at the time, um, it was more about transactions that were much more complex than just monetary, software within transactions, code within transactions. But Dash, I'm gonna miss a bunch of them. Steam, even Wax today, and EOS, Hex.
We
I've looked at the
oh,
tokenomics
we
of
had a
these like
project on
crazy.
recent. Sorry, we had a
Yeah.
project on recently. Our first project that I heard was building up a game on the Wax blockchain. Actually, recently they were on
Oh, sweet.
a week and a half ago. A week ago? Yeah, about a week ago now. Yeah, it's a pretty cool P2E game, and they're building it up on the Wax blockchain. Sorry, I didn't want to interject, but I wanted to jump in because it's the first project I'd seen actually building up on that blockchain. It was cool to have a chance to host them, and just with you bringing that up as one of these bigger potential projects, I really think like they also have a lot of use case.
Hmm.
And I know I chatted to a digital as well last night about Pulse too, just kind of with regards to that. So I think with what you guys are doing over there, and I mean, I'll let you kind of keep going into some of your background, but it just, yeah, like you're clearly some of these names you're bringing up. I hope people are paying attention because they're some of the top. projects and top altcoins in the space right now in terms of rankings and community sentiment.
Yeah, thank you. And tokenomics is extremely interesting because if you if you find a crypto with a really good like financial part, really good tokenomics that lead to, you know, financial amplification, that's exciting. You know, that can change things in your life. You know, money's not everything, but there's a lot of really cool things you can do from that or learn from that and explore from that. You say about like the video games on Wax in Wax EOS, you know, Wax having a lot more a lot more people actually use Wax, and to be frank, the community and businesses behind Wax are are stellar. They're great. They're super lacking in the EOS world, unfortunately. Uh, you know, Wax is really the only blockchain where you could do things like video games on the blockchain. So I very intimately understand many blockchains, many smart contracts, and it's something that I'm very interested in. And there's so many really cool things to learn. There's so much innovation. There's just so much awesomeness out there, and um, and so today, that's what I'm doing with the Genius Smart Financial Contract. You know, it's a store of value token designed to be scarce, valuable, appreciate in value, etc. Right? Um, but a lot of this came from not only tokenomics, really interesting tokenomics in the industry, but also the recent business venture I was in that was focused on retirement and focused on savings. Uh, I mean, Genius really is the crypto solution to retirement. But here before this company I was working with, um, I got super in tune with people and what they wanted to save for, and you know, their ideas on retirement. And there's no reason we need to have banks and banks today. We don't need banks today, really. I mean, we do in some ways, and we really don't need like all of these centralized retirement plans and such for people. They all suck. They're not that great, and as a user, people kind of know this, or they're in complete denial, or they're just trusting, you know, the wrong company. But there's no reason why we can't have things like savings and retirement on the blockchain, and there's no reason why we can't have um, like this store of value industry that has to do like gold, Bitcoin, banking CDs, or time lock deposits. This industry that's well worth over $25 trillion. There's no reason why that can't be on the blockchain. And Genius is doing this, and the Genius is taking every ounce of my experience through my entire life.
I mean,
Quick
it's
draw.
funny you mentioned the retirements aspect because Digital and I had a phenomenal chat last night about the type of investors and the type of money that you guys are trying to kind of bring into the project, and we made that joke about old money being kind of like what would ultimately help drive this project forward because in the sense that crypto is such a saturated market right now, and especially with the downturn and the lack of sentiment and people just selling for their own gain, you guys have built up a floor and built up a community and understanding of holding. So I think pulling people in outside of crypto and catering to those people who have maybe more of a stock background similar to myself and Digital. I know he kind of comes from that background as well. And
Mhm.
just having that mentality where a short-term investment is something like 6 months to a year in the sense of not 24 hours or less. So what are you guys doing to really push it out to like those non-crypto users? Because I think, like you said, that's such a huge opportunity and a big pool of real live money who understand the point of savings and what a store of value can do long term.
Well, when you're done listening to this AMA, or we're done talking, if any of you have a piece of paper to write down, do this for homework. Just go up to someone, anyone, and I did this recently. Well, not anyone, someone you're talking with, right? And say, hey, you've got a bunch of old money. You want to turn that into new money? And they're super intrigued. People are very intrigued on having better utility to do with their current value. Once again, that is, well, let me give that to you in a story. I was talking with a CEO of a family office, you know, for like investing for family funds that have, you know, billions of dollars. And I'd said that. Um, I was just feeling very playful. Said, "Hey, you want to turn old money into new money?" And they're just like, "Yeah." Well, hold on a second. What do you mean by that? You're talking about blockchain, right? Like they're just, I mean, they know what I'm doing and they're curious about that. And so that's like, how are we pushing it, or how is the Genius community pushing this to non-crypto users? There's a lot in that how. There's a lot in that how. One thing I can say is what we're doing so far. I mean, it's been a month and a half. We're up over 100-fold in price, or 100 times the value of, like 5, 6 weeks ago. We recently, it's still super early that, recently our 24-hour volume, hit its high of over $140,000. The market cap is over 55 million right now, over 1.3 million in liquidity, which is a sweet amount of liquidity compared to our market cap, or compared to, whatever else. And while the entire crypto community or crypto industry right now is tanking and dying, and then you even have people like, people talking about how they were right about this crypto project and everyone's dying. I hear a lot of coughing. Genius is up, and Genius is making all-time highs and has been making all-time highs day after day after day. The placeholder token for Genius, the the pre-order token, I guess you can call it, is making all-time highs. So why is that? Why is there one token that is making all-time highs, has exploded in market cap, it's gaining more and more volume daily, and the initial token distribution, the sacrifice event, over $50 million was sacrificed in like what, 6, 7, 8 days, a week. Why is this going on? Well, one, the marketing group, which is just really community members, is not only putting down their own funds and their own effort to spread this message, but they want to tell people about what's really novel about Genius. Genius, a crypto solution to retirement, a new type of store of value. So communication is really a big part of it. Uh, Communicating what we've been doing. We have to speak these things in layman's terms, right? We can't use technological speak. Even though I have a technical background and I'm talking with developers all day long, uh, if Genius is the future, then we can't really talk future speak. We have to talk today speak.
So kind of, yeah, like that's a really interesting way of putting it. And I think last night when Digital and I chatted, it's um, we spoke because I mentioned to him that I had like a background from school in like cognitive psych because I used to work in sales, and I thought it was really important to understand like buying behavior, pattern recognition, and those types of things. But one thing I think people miss in the space, so I always put this back to people that I talk about in my own life that are investing just in stocks and stuff like that. So stock, like, startups, about 98% of startups fail. And those are often backed by, multi-millions and venture capitals. Oftentimes they have tangible products that are ready to ship, inventory ready, distribution networks set up and stuff like that. And they physical offices, and they still fail often. And then if you like elongate that into crypto, where there's a smaller market share, only like what, 5 to 10% of people globally adopted crypto or something like that. And then it's a down market. So it's already like something like 97% of low caps fail, 99% of meme coins fail. So if you think about that mentality, you have to invest in 100 projects to hit that one project that's going to essentially make you rich, for lack of a better terms, right? So if people get that mentality into their head, I think people will start to shift their investment habits to more of these, or to less of these degen quick return plays, hopefully, to trying to just do a bit more research and to jump into something that could yield value long term. Because any of the holders in your community that jumped in and have just stayed patient during the development, the growth phase of the project, have been very happily rewarded recently. And I think that's like what's missing from the space. And like from a psychology perspective, it's really tough for people to get that back in their heads, just because market is down, sentiment is down. It's really, there's a lot of variable factors going on right now. But I think that if you don't want to try and jump into 100 projects before you're going to hit the one that might make it, just based on sheer numbers of statistics that have been going on for like years. Well, maybe not in crypto, but um, it's shifting that mentality. And I think that's why a project like this really should speak to people in the long term. Yes, it might take a little bit more time for people to jump in, like you said, do some homework, understand the specifics. Yes, it's on Ethereum, so maybe some people are a little bit more hesitant on the fees and stuff like that, which I think we can talk to a little bit about how your smart contract on the mining side is kind of beneficial to be on Ethereum, because ETH is a great sorry. ETH is
Well,
a great network, I think, for bigger investors and stuff, and it does have a lot of value. And I think, obviously, as a blockchain as a whole, that promise of ETH2 has been out there for a while, and it's going to be exciting to see how like the development of the actual chain itself can help further the growth of your own project too. So, I think the chain you guys have chosen is very smart for the type of investors and the type of project you're going for this, as it is a longer term play. You don't have to worry, in my opinion, so much about those swing trades, because people who are buying in should be buying in for the longevity, as you guys position it similar to some of those other major alts that you talked about. So yeah, I wanted to kind of jump a little bit into
thanks.
sorry.
If I could please say, the strategy behind Ethereum, Ethereum is priced out the little guy with these big fees, but the strategy behind Ethereum is, well, I know Richard Hart and I know Pulse Chain, and Pulse Chain is going to be a fork of Ethereum that won't price out the little guy. And so there's a strategy behind this. You'll have Genius on both chains, Pulse Chain and Ethereum. And this is very healthy. This is very healthy. People will be able to choose which chain they want to use Genius on, and the one that people want to use it on will ultimately have the most value. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think it does. And to me, would you guys have any potential of rolling out your contract in the future across different chains, or
It's potential. If it's best for everyone, it's going to happen. Um, and not just this, but pretty much everything and anything and everything is being considered, because with Genius, the success behind Genius so far, you know, even being that it's not the official Genius decentralized, immutable smart contract, but the success behind it so far is lies in incentives, good deals for everyone, and incentives like everywhere for every human behavior that's going to create a healthy market. Um, you know, there's an artificial intelligence layer in Genius, or an artificial intelligence embedded into Genius, and it's AI. It incentivizes users' behavior to produce upward market trends that benefit all holders of Genius. Now, that's for the official smart contract, and we're going to see that in the future. But now, all of the team's own actions and community own actions are geared towards, myself and some others influencing other people. Incentives. Let's do incentives for this. For example, you have a lot of coins in the past that would pay their developers and such in the coin, right? And then what happened from there is you'd have, let's say, XYZ coin, and I just say XY, let's say ABC coin. You have ABC coin, and as it's being developed, a lot of the developers are getting ABC coin, and eventually people want, you know, expenses to live. They want to pay for their expenses, so they're constantly liquidating and dumping ABC coin on the market. Well, so the early treasury with Genius, instead is paying developers in US dollar coin or whatever, and incentivizing them to buy Genius. So you end up seeing more positive market activity from this. So this is just one of many, many, many incentives that have been thrown down. And you're talking about why businesses fail, right? Um, and not that, one thing I do want to say here, and this has a lot to do with what has been driving the community, is not why do businesses fail, but businesses fail because ultimately people change their mind, and the resources that are using isn't, an unlimited resource. Like Steve Jobs from Apple would say, like, hey, you need passion and love for something. and your passion and love is not going to run out. It's just going to keep going and going and going. So all these businesses that fail, I would say chances are there was less love and passion in that. And passion is super sexy. You see somebody talking about a cryptocurrency and they seem crazy out of their mind talking about it, and they're just very passionate. It's still a little attractive. Like, maybe I should kind of like check it out a little bit on my own instead of assuming they're crazy. Because passion is very attractive, and I have a ton of passion in Genius, and the community. The passion is just growing and growing because there's something exciting here.
You say it's kind of been the, you guys have been running for a year. What's been like the most common feedback that you've received from maybe people who jump into the Telegram and engage with yourself or the community about the project?
The most common thing over the last year has been, when's the white paper coming? You see, even though like a year and 3 months ago, the placeholder token was released, right? The placeholder token was released to do healthy things in the beginning, like get a liquidity group started, and so people would see the token, and besides talking about the future, it's like, hey, you can look at this as a pre-order token that doesn't do anything. Let's call it a placeholder. But yeah, the most common thing was, where's the white paper? And over the last year, 3 months ish, over the last like 15 months, the tokenomics for Genius have been being worked out and simulated, and lots of Python, Sigma 4, etc. Lots of spreadsheets to figure this out. And what it boiled down to is like, well, what do we do? Write a white paper that's like 2 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs? There wasn't a lot to say that people would understand, other than, you tell someone, hey, this is a new store of value. Okay, well, say a little bit about its design. Okay, let me say a little bit about its design. But these things don't make sense. This is a very new technology. This is very new methods. So after about 12, 13, 14 months, we finished the white paper, put a lot of formulas in it, and talked about the purpose of different mechanics of these Genius tokenomics. And that was released about 5, 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that. And then from there, people kept asking, you know, where's this white paper? Come on, man, the white paper is the most important thing. It took a long time to develop this white paper because it took a really long time to think about these artificial intelligence incentives, to think about you know a technology where value just only goes up over time. Well, what is value? Like, what is that really in the universe? Besides it being something that's different to everybody, something subjective. What is it universally? And and this took a lot of discussions with a lot of really smart people. And 6 weeks ago ish, uh, people understand the white paper a lot more, and there's curiosities and there's cool things about it. So that's the most feedback I've gotten in the last year. The most feedback over the last month, um, it really varies all over the place. It ranges from, hey, am I too late, to, like, for people that are afraid they missed the boat, right? Because your typical cryptocurrency investor or person just wants to get in early, right? And then take liquidity from other people and run and celebrate. Um, and other feedback is like, well, okay, how is this different than some other successful store of value like Hex? And the feedback has been a lot of questions, and a lot of concern is like, hey, hold on, this is going to be on Pulse Chain, right? Is it going to be on Pulse Chain? Like, the whole world wants everything to run on Pulse Chain. So many people have been priced out of Ethereum. So that's been the majority of the feedback so far. And
Perfect.
I'll just say some random words. Okay, thank you.
No, no, I'm here. So I wanted to, like, I mean, obviously, like with a project like this, that's why I think it's my feedback is, with if people come into a project that's relatively new, concepts exciting, and they don't say anything, that's probably worse than questions. Questions show engagement, questions show potential interest, and potential interest means potential investors down the line, right? So I think that sentiment of itself is really good. And I think there's a couple of other aspects, myself and Digital touched on last night, that are just really bullish about the project. Obviously, the fact that you guys have been, some people from the Hex community have kind of reached out about the project and shown some interest. Obviously, that's something that uh, should show like that you guys are on the right path as well. From a market standpoint, you guys have held very well and pushed up in some of the tougher conditions we've seen. Another indicator that I look for, you speak through your background and kind of talk about the experience you've had in the space, how you jumped into this idea, and then how the concept here for the Genius smart contract has really evolved over its initial conception about 2 years back to where you guys are now. And obviously, as you continue to push forward to your release later this summer, or transition, I guess, should I call it. I wanted to have you walk us through the specifics behind the sacrifice that you guys have, because I did post the link. I think we briefly touched on it. I know you went into the AI component of the smart contract and essentially the store of value with gold and Bitcoin over time. But I wanted to touch on kind of how the benefits to those individuals that go through the sacrifice project, maybe somebody who buys in today and then chooses to sacrifice before the next point increase in a couple days, what's going to be that benefit from buying in and then jumping into the sacrifice now versus potentially waiting until the next threshold?
All right. By the way, what do you mean by next threshold?
Oh, I don't know what the next point rate increase would
Oh,
be, but
okay.
I'm assuming it would go up. So like just it would be obviously at a different buy level than the previous one, correct?
hmm Well, yes, the for this, so a sacrifice was done, before there was a placeholder token, and the idea was that people would mint their placeholder token onto the new Genius Smart Financial Contract during launch or after launch. And then so the sacrifice model came in because I mean the truth is the sacrifice model is is it it can take a lot less human work than like initial token offerings in ICOs and all that. But the sacrifice model, yeah, I've looked at it like crazy since last year with like Pulse Chain, PulseX, and different other sacrifice models. And I've come to the conclusion that the sacrifice model is like the fairest and probably the absolute best way to initially distribute the first coins of a cryptocurrency or of a token or whatever, or maybe even for NFTs. So it's an incredible model to have a very fair, like distribution, equitable distribution between the whole community. And the a lot of the founders and tokens, a lot of tokens out there, the founders, the founders and the developers or whoever, they've made a lot of personal sacrifices of their time, a lot of personal sacrifices, of their time with their talents. And how can the community get involved? Well, with sacrifices, the community gets involved by really making a statement on the blockchain. All a sacrifice is sending your tokens and coins to a public address, and then everybody else in the world can see publicly that like all of these people support this cause. And so um, sacrifices today and with initial coin distribution, it's kind of like a game of, well, how much is going to get distributed to everybody? How much is going to get airdropped to people of this brand new, completely worthless token coming out, but intellectually valuable, right? And a lot of curiosity on it, and something that there's a lot of belief in. The Genius sacrifice, so when you send your tokens to the address, right, to a sacrifice address to make that statement, there are different incentives that help you get more sacrifice points, and sacrifice points ultimately equal the airdrop you're going to get of the token. So you asked earlier, like, okay, well, why would somebody sacrifice now versus sacrifice in a few days? That's a personal decision, really. But either way, with this sacrifice, there are three incentives, three core incentives. The first one is that earlier pays better, is what it's called. Earlier pays better multiplier. And all that means is the earlier you do your sacrifice, the more points you're going to get. And then another incentive is bigger pays better. So, these are words that like anybody can really understand. Okay, bigger pays better, which means the size of your sacrifice, the size of your transaction, the larger it is, the more of an incentive it is for you, the more points you're going to get. It's sort of like the earlier pays better is sort of like, the early bird catches the worm, and then bigger pays better has a lot to do with, if you're somebody buying um, a lot of supply of something, why not get a little discount? Why not get a little bit of extra? Um, and the third incentive here, the third um, mechanic for these sacrifice points and gaming this, the third one is that genius pays better. And what this means is that when you are sacrificing the legacy token, so when you're sacrificing the placeholder token, the token that doesn't do all these like amazing things that the official Genius smart financial contract will do. When you sacrifice Genius, you get an incentive. You basically get relatively more sacrifice points than if you were to sacrifice any other token. Now, this is a pretty amazing incentive that is going to change all sacrifices in the future, all sacrifices that are aware of this. Um, yeah, and by the way, for people to take advantage of or to get the benefit of or to game the Genius pays better multiplier, what they do is you'll take their USD coin, buy the legacy Genius token with it, and then sacrifice that legacy Genius token.
And I
The
mean, like
Genius
as you
pays
go
better,
through
by the
the,
way, if I could please add to that.
yeah,
Um,
of course.
with if you go to the website sacrifice.to, that's the domain, sacrifice.to, you can read more about it, but the Genius pays better. It's it's really only paying better when, I'll do all the math for you so you don't have to do the math yourself or don't have to read it here. But the Genius pays better multiplier really only pays better, quote, quote, if the value of the legacy Genius token is under $3.33, which today it's like $1.58. So as long as the legacy Genius is under $3.33, it's worth it to buy it and sacrifice it. And likewise, if the legacy Genius is over $3.33, really holders are incentivized to sell it and then sacrifice what they've received after selling it. So it's an interesting mechanic. Exciting.
And I mean, even as you walk through the explanation, I think just hearing the passion in your voice, for me, just again, it's about connecting with the team, the vision, and the feasibility, and just the detail that you can explain things to people with, even more relatively new concepts to some people, even myself. Like some of this technical stuff, I'm taking notes here on the side because digital and I didn't really go into so much of the technical stuff. It was more so outlining kind of the vision, the growth. And I mean, we spent a good 20 minutes kind of chatting about you too. And just like that's what really got me excited for the AMA tonight is just
Oh, thank you.
your time in the space and how you built it up. And I think ultimately what you're trying to build towards in the future. And it's only, I guess now, what would it be, about 13 months, not even fully 13 months yet, since you went live. And if you think about, your experience with some of the other, major stores of value that have come into the DeFi space and some of the other major altcoins, they take years to grow to their even early potential and then beyond. So like everybody here is still relatively new. And the fact that people, I know some people will in a down market see, a 55, 58, whatever $1 million cap and be like, oh, I'm late. It's too high. But it's like that's why with a project like this, it's just super important to understand and listen to the future potential, not so much just what they're doing right now. Because if you look at the chart, that growth has happened in the last couple of weeks, and the work has been going on for 2 years. So it's not an immediate return on investment. It's more of a sustained project, and that's why you'll find such a positive vibe, I think, in that community, because the people who are there get it, and they're there for the long term. And that's what you kinda need to a certain extent.
True. Yeah, true. Um, and even, not only do you have to have incentives for existing users, but your chart and your tokenomics, or even there has to be incentives for new users to believe and know that they're going to get utility out of it. Right? That's important, and that's a hard nut to crack. It's a crackable nut, though.
Kinda looking at the growth of the project, it's just so unique. I'm trying to find my words right for this question. Um, chat, I guess, education wise, do you guys have a plan to maybe incorporate? I know you have your, actually, you know what? I didn't even talk about that. Why don't we talk about your YouTube channel a little bit? Because I know you do run a YouTube channel where you kind of focus on, education within the crypto sector as well. So I think education for a project like this with a newer concept is very important. So actually, that's an idea, and that's something Digital mentioned that I did want to bring up. I almost forgot. So from an education standpoint, what are you guys doing as a community to really, I mean, Genius is a great name. If you guys can be a proprietor of education and knowledge in the space, I think that just further lends to your branding and can really push you guys to that next level. So what are you doing on that stage?
I mean, me personally, I'm focusing all my time with the developers to be sure that the smart contract implementation is completely and fully aligned with its design. And so that's what I'm doing. As far as the community, you talking with digital was great for that. Um, our initial strategy, of course, is to communicate with cryptocurrency people, because cryptocurrency people are going to get it readily, and their questions, because we get lots of questions in the Telegram room, and I read every single thing in the Telegram room. There's like almost 1,000 members and tons of messages, but it's important to be in tune with that. But these questions from these crypto people are really helping us figure out other ways to communicate this, and the communication is important. So our initial strategy is to talk with crypto people and to help crypto people get that utility, because crypto people are going to be the first evangelists, besides the community members who are crypto people who are extremely excited about this, who are also evangelists that want to help people, get what they're looking for. And a lot of times that does have to do with savings, retirement, things like that, or getting into a better financial position. Uh, so, post launch, um, post launch, as far as like community sentiment, we're definitely going to pivot off different like on ramping ideas. Now, personally, um, a lot of the secret sauce, or not really secret sauce, but a lot of what went behind, I told you earlier that I had worked with the Dash Core Group, another marketing team, and my company to bring Dash up to number 3 in crypto market cap. That's the measurement. Oh, cool, went to number 3. Something great must have happened. Well, I understood and talked to the Dash community, and they all were like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But I understood that the most important thing to grow an ecosystem, let's use Dash as an example, is that when people are getting Dash in the first place, back then they were buying Bitcoin and then they were converting their Bitcoin to Dash. So, as great as Dash would do, really it was pumping Bitcoin in the first place. So, um, so we worked to get Dash to get people to be able to buy Dash directly, like fiat on ramps for Dash. And this is about the time where fiat on ramp really became an industry term. So, so people, what we made possible was for people to get Dash directly from the Dash wallet, but also able to get Dash from different websites. Wall of Coins was one of them, where people could do something as simple as drop cash off at a bank or drop cash off at any, like, we call them payment destinations, but like CVS Pharmacy and Walgreens and etc., where people could drop off cash and people could pay with Zelle and different money ways to get Dash. So fiat on ramping is super important. Yes, this decentralized exchange that's going on, that's great. That's for crypto people, but ultimately, after crypto people all have their ammunition to help really bring this utility to other people and change a lot of people's lives, we're going to have to pivot and talk with your average person, average words and communication, but have fiat on ramps. Get people to upgrade their old money to new money easily instead of jumping through, like, exchange stuff that has like limit orders and buy sell limit orders and stop trading and all that. That'd be hilarious if you said to me, by the way, Robert, you were muted for about 10 minutes. Could you say
Nope,
it
you're
again?
you're good. You're Gucci. I was just
I
giving
know, just being funny.
digital an old DM quickly. He just messaged me back. He's like, "Hey man, thanks so much. It's going well." So I
Digital
wanted
is
to.
awesome. Like
Yeah, he is.
like
He's such
the fact
such a
that the
great guy to chat
community,
to.
if I could please say it, the fact that the community has someone like Digital and many other people who are in the Genius community is huge. It's massive. Like, Genius and the Genius community and the workforce behind Genius is like a crypto investor's dream come true. You find that very rare in the crypto world. So Digital, if you're listening, you're awesome. Who else we got here? Yeah,
Marshmallow's in
if
here
you,
too.
there you
Big
go. I was about to say
Marshmallow's in
Marshmallow.
here.
You
Yeah, I
come to the
saw him in
Genius token
the
room.
comment section.
There's Florida Taxman. There's Janik. They're all awesome. Digital, KD, Marshmallow.
Taxman.
Marshmallow's great. Florida,
Taxman
yeah,
in
I know Florida.
Florida, he doesn't have to pay much, does he? They don't have many taxes down there.
I don't know. He comes into the room and everybody's all scared. Like, what? Florida's tax man? No, I'm kidding. Um, yeah, there's a lot of great people. Rose is awesome. Just kidding. Rose is a bot. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Uh, People like Marco and Dom, people who are German speaking and have started the German room on their own. There's people who have started the Chinese room on their own. I think his name is Wang Ting, and people who've started Spanish room on their own. Individual named Harold, CEO of Mandingo Swap, and some other interesting names that I can kind of see in my head, but I don't even know how to pronounce it or say it. Yeah, it's a great community.
I got a nice message from Marshmallow too right now. So I'm chatting with them, a couple of them as well on my end. So I did want to
Yeah,
obviously,
Chrissy's a
we're
very
kind of.
active admin too.
Oh, okay,
You see
nice.
the
Yeah,
admin Chrissy, she's awesome.
I'm gonna definitely be spending more time in there going forward. So I'll get to meet, I think, more of the community members. I think one on one, hopefully in the days ahead, after the AMA. So it's going to be exciting for me because, like I said, this project just has, in my opinion, so much potential. And if you think about what you're trying to do and the success of maybe projects that you've taken some guidance from, it just, there's so much road ahead, I think, in my opinion. So let me get
And
some
you
community
mentioned,
questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
sure. Oh no, that's great. I'd love to. You mentioned crypto education, very important. If you search YouTube, I mean, maybe you've seen it, but for other people who haven't, search YouTube for Genius Tokenomics. That's my channel on YouTube. I do go into a lot of different tokenomics other than Genius itself. And then there's a lot of old things that have to do with like health and stuff, but core focus is crypto. The more you listen, like crypto can be, there's a lot to learn, but the more you just listen to these things, especially from people in the industry who like really, know what they're talking about, you'll eventually absorb that and you'll learn it and you'll learn the words. It's incredibly helpful. So I want to encourage other people to do that, to keep learning, to keep listening to great thinkers in the crypto world on YouTube or podcasts, etc.
Perfect. And like, yeah, Marshmallow is just chatting with me as well over here. He's just so excited to be a part of the community and the project. And I mean, I just think that speaks volume too when you can get people into the community that are really believers of you. Yeah, there's monetary aspects, but his comments to me are like they believe in you as like the founder. And like that's why I think this project is unique because the overwhelming, I've talked to maybe 4 or 5 members of the community and everybody says the same thing. It's like you're the reason why they're excited about the future of the project because they see how much you put into it and they see what you're doing to try and grow the project the right way, not just use it as a project to benefit yourself in some way. It's actually for the community and it's for your love of crypto and your that drive to make an impact in the space that you've been involved in so long.
Yeah, thank you for noticing. I appreciate that. I appreciate those words.
But anyways, I've stolen a lot of mic time from my community. I apologize, guys. I got about 8 questions in my DMs already. I know I've seen some in the comment section. We got some hands up here, so I will start getting in some questions because that's one of the favorite. I know my favorite parts is just seeing our community's response and feedback to some of these projects. So we got our first question here. It's been a couple days since we've heard from Travis Mack. So Travis here has a DM. His mic normally isn't the greatest, so he just sends me his questions now. So this one is kind of related to the educational materials. So is there educational materials fully explaining the project for crypto's beginner? I sent the white paper and website links to somebody that I think would be interested in the project, and he's just having a little bit of a hard time understanding it, just specifically the sacrifice and all. He's like, I've been in crypto for a couple of months now, and I'm even having trouble a little bit myself getting the grasp of it. So just in summary, how do you plan on explaining your project to people new in this space, but really want to invest in what I could see is a brilliant project? And then he said, kind of, what would be your target market kind of off of that? So first question is education based, and then next one would be kind of your target.
Okay, yeah, I got that. Thank you. So to explain this to new people, really, that's a ongoing development of communication. Like even in the Bitcoin world, um, it took so long for people to figure out how to explain things, and it wasn't easy because if you were looking at the code or you were looking at the white paper, those weren't your average words for people. So it's a really good question. So to explain the project, um, I've been doing, I've been talking with a lot more people and having those talks recorded, putting it on the YouTube, and especially with a sacrifice. I did a video specifically on, what are sacrifices and mechanics behind it. And in this video, I have my screen being shared, and I'm doing like an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm doing the math right on the fly. And I'm even sitting there going, hold on a second, I think I got the math a little wrong here. Let me fix this. So it's very live, very raw. And but what people should know with education here, right? Because this is very overwhelming. But think of it like, you know, it's going to be overwhelming. But these things that people are talking about, it's like a new language. So be patient with yourself and just know you're going to be learning new words and new concepts, right? And I know we want to understand things quickly. So what I've found that helps the quickest and the most is to listen to a lot of materials. Maybe you're somebody who likes to read more, so yeah, read. But for example, the white paper, you can't just read it once and get it, no matter who you are. Like myself, when I study like other tokenomics for some other crypto, it's not like I put on a lab coat, and I sit there in like really comfortable environment and I read. Um, I'll read the white paper and I'm just sitting there like, um, dang, this is I don't get this. I don't get it at all. And then but even though you don't get it, still new concepts have been introduced to you that are going to be familiar when somebody else talks about it. New concepts that are going to be a little, you might not get them, but they'll at least be familiar the next time you hear about them in a YouTube video or a podcast. So how is this going to be explained? New language is being developed today. I mean, where we're at so far in communications, helping a lot of people, and we have to keep going back and updating our website, updating certain parts of the white paper. And just for the people who are learning, just remember this is like a new language. You're going to get it. And ultimately, like, the target market, the target audience that we have for this, the people who are going to have the utility, it's kind of unfair to say target market, because this isn't like, we're not like Walmart or McDonald's or something. This is something that has utility that ultimately the whole community benefits, not one person benefits from it. So ultimately, the people that can get utility from this range in all sorts of languages and all sorts of educational levels, right? The audience is really people interested in store of value, and that's more than $25 trillion across the United States, China, and all over. So this is a very wide, um, when it comes to educational materials and fully explaining. There are people out there where certain things they don't need explained to them. Like a lot of hexicans, a lot of people from the hex community. There's a lot of concepts that they don't need explained to them. But then there are a lot of other new concepts that they do. So you pick up little by little. I know people where it's taken them, more than a year to understand something like hex, or a couple of years. And myself, it took multiple weekends, and I was especially interested because I'm like, cool, this is around the lines of what myself and others are looking to build as the best store of value on earth. Hope I didn't go too long on that. I just really want to encourage people, to be patient with themselves and just believe in themselves that they will pick up more about this, and that the community is always refining its communications.
Amazing. I really appreciate, I mean, never apologize for giving a lot of detail on a good answer. And I never mind that, it's always very concise, and you're covering a lot of information. And, he asked about education. You touched on so many important factors. So even myself, Travis, I'll kind of help you put it into complete transparency. I'm not a dev. I'm not a technical guy. I used to work in business development, and, I did analytics to a certain extent. I really love numbers, but, if you send me in a contract, I'm going to be lost to a certain extent outside of, being able to track certain addresses, where funds went from like a, tracking standpoint, from a coding standpoint, I'm lost. So, even me, I chatted to digital. I've had a chance to review. I've listened to a previous AMA. I've read all the information, and even for me, like when Rob talks, some of the technical knowledge is just I have to do future research as well. So I don't think it's something to shy away from, and I think just jumping in and asking those maybe tougher questions that you maybe feel have already been addressed, that it's good, because your own comfort level is important, and you never should shy away from asking a question when maybe somebody else and you have very different levels of risk and stuff like that. So always ask questions that are relevant to you guys as investors. So uh, let me get Henrique up here. It's been a while since we've heard from him. Hopefully his mic's okay. While we're waiting for Henrique, I do have another
What's up?
question.
What's up, Maurice?
Oh, he's quick. What's going on, Henrique?
Hey guys. First of all, what the hell? How can you manage to hold that chart during these times? Like,
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thank you.
um, I don't really have like a question, but just to see if I understand the staking promise days like properly. So the promise day section shows that you can stake your tokens up to 12 years. Is that it? Like, just so I'm not like confused. That's a
Yes.
pretty long hold then. And just to see if I get it, to double the amount of tokens you have, you would have to hold it for 57 days. So you would divide by the same amount, and it would be one. Is that it? Like doubling would take 4 years or something like that.
It's not that it's to double your coins will take 4 years, because that that kind of stuff is going to depend on market activity and people activity. What that means, in the white paper is that to get a bonus on how much of the reward share pool you have, um, to get a bonus that is effectively the same as you putting down double the amount of genius, um, you're going to want to create these mining stakes for at least 4 years. You're going to want to stake the genius for at least 4 years.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Don't get me wrong. I'm asking the kind of stuff because we see so much like API, like million% and shit, and I
Mhm.
just think like finally, a serious project that actually can do what it promises. So these numbers just make me more hype, I think. Thank you very much, brother. Thank you,
Oh,
Maurice.
thank you for asking. Thank you, Henry.
Thanks, Enrique. Great questions, man. Always love seeing you out here. So we will have here our next question in from DC. What's going on, DC? He's he's big into the Bitcoin analysis, so I think he should probably have a good one for you.
Oh, cool.
Hey man, look, dude. First of all, I am just thoroughly impressed with how well you guys held this up, man. Which leads me to ask this question, and I mean this in like all seriousness. What type of investors got into your project? I mean, like, what types of people are over it? I looked in the group and it was like 800 some people. I joined this AMA late, so if you had like a transfer or something, I don't know about it. But like, dude, like, how did you get that?
Oh, thank you. I really
I love
appreciate
it.
that. And like, I mean, I don't know if you're like a Bitcoin maximalist or anything like that, but I hear you're big into Bitcoin. And one thing I want to say, by the way, is I'm really surprised by the lack of like maximalist hate that has come around. Like, because that's kind of what always happened with altcoins and stuff. But how, what type of people? Like, man, I mean, it just seemed to be kind of all over. I don't know, but how to, I guess, attract those people? I think no matter who we are, we're going to attract people no matter what. I think the passion has a lot to do with it. Seeing people who are excited about something. Innovation, is another thing. Doing something different is another thing. Doing something not out of selfish reasons. And it's yeah. So I don't really like know the whole how. I haven't analyzed it, but I just know if you have a good product, right, or if something is useful, people are going to use it. Might seem pretty obvious, but and it's in the definition. But if something's useful, people will use it. If something seems like it could be useful, it's interesting, so to say, then people will have interest in it, interest in using it. They want to know the utility. People want to know how to make their lives better, how to make things easier, and also learn more and stuff. And something's intellectually interesting or even emotionally interesting. People are interested and attracted to it. Hope that helps. Thank you. That's a good question.
Yeah, man, because ever since I've gotten here, I've always said the same thing that we're gonna go to like 30K, high 20s, and I always ask people like when I see good projects and good leaders, I always ask like, how are you guys going to attract some type of investors that are actually going to sit back and hold their nuts like these, and you've managed to do it. So I think that is like profoundly amazing. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you. I
I'm gonna have
appreciate that.
to, yeah, I'm gonna have to join your group and follow that.
Yes, sir. Do the same as me, Dees. I'll see you in there, baby.
Thanks, Dees.
All right, we'll get our next one in here. We'll try. Well, we haven't heard from Jason in a while. Let's get Jason Williams in here for a question. I know sometimes his mic gives him trouble, so if it does in this situation, I know he DM'd me his questions, so I got him here on backup. Jason, if you are ready, go ahead, my man. If not, I got your question ready to fire. Oh, we sent it in chat. I lost it in the comment section. Where's Jason? I can't find Jason's question in the comments earlier. I know he was asking. I think maybe it got answered because I know he was asking about the security of the platform, but I don't see it anywhere in the comments. So I will ask another question while we're waiting for Jason maybe to pop on from Nomad. So Nomad's username is Nomad Calls One. So his question here was, how did you actually come up with the idea for the sacrifice function? Because you said it's extremely creative and it's rare to see stuff this bold like that. Could you be able to tell us a little bit about the conception for the sacrifice? I think we talked about when it happened, but not so much like the idea and the creative side behind it.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I truly am more of a creative person. Um, you know, using like intellectual things for my creativity. Um, now with the sacrifice, I mean that's inspired by an old idea in the crypto community in general for sacrificing, and that's been around at least 2018, but I'm sure much longer than that. And so for two of the mechanics of the sacrifice points, and how that will relate to how much of the initial distribution that a sacrifice participant will receive. Two of the mechanics were already established in other communities like Liquid Loans, PulseX, Pulse Chain, and that was the bigger pays better and the earlier pays better. Uh, and these are good things with value and with incentivizing people to get involved, right? And the third mechanic being the genius pays better. Um, it came to me where I was just kind of like thinking to myself that like, well, if this works, right? And this is early thoughts. If this works and the ideas behind this, then really this is something that will quote pay like better. This is something that'll be worth people's attention. And so, and so for the mechanic, from there, like, all right, cool. Like, how can that become a mechanic of the tokenomics? And uh, this, to be frank, it was kind of easy from there. I just sort of like thought to myself, like, okay, I picked up something crazy, right? I was like, all right, it'll pay better. How about legacy geniuses were like $25 per like genius token sacrifice? Cool. And I analyzed it. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Talked with other people about it. Like, yeah, it's kind of crazy too. But this sounds really interesting. And so decided to move forward with that mechanic using the different number, different value. Yeah, I appreciate the question, and calling it bold too, bold as well, and there are a lot of bold things going on. There are a lot of bold things going on with Genius in general. Like
Uh,
like one,
what's that? Sorry to catch you up, but what's like the tagline that I've seen is, I know it's from like a different network, but the tagline, bold fortunes, or what's crypto.com's,
oh,
tagline, bold favors the
mm,
brave or something like that,
it was
or
fortune something. Is it favors the brave?
yeah, fortune
Fortune
favors the
favors the brave.
brave or the bold, or I think it's fortune favors the bold or something like that.
All I remember is Matt Damon.
Yeah. I don't want to do that Team America
Well,
impression because that's
oh,
bad.
yeah. All right, you got that. So, but there,
Yeah, I love
he
it.
was saying like, hey, that was very bold, and I appreciate that. And really, one bold thing for the longest time has been to challenge Bitcoin, right? Like anybody who challenged Bitcoin was just like, if someone challenged Bitcoin, there were many community members screaming, "Burn the infidel!" Right? And because it was very cult like, right? It was cool. It was cool. Bitcoin was awesome. And then you had, Hex challenge Bitcoin, and all the Bitcoin maximalists in the world hate Hex and call it a scam. And then Hex proved itself, more than 10,000 folding in price from lowest to highest value or whatever in less than 2 years. And then you have Genius coming out, really being the only one to just like, to challenge Bitcoin and challenge Hex, and so to say, learn from the goods and the bads of all these systems and other systems, and stand on the shoulder of giants, like so to say, to create a better store of value. So I appreciate Nomad calls. I think his name was Nomad calls one.
Yes,
Saying
sir. That was the man himself. So thanks, Nomad. It's great to see you out. It's been a little while, I think, since we've had you on. So I love to see the interest in the project here. And I did get Jason's question sent. He said he apologizes. He was having some issues with his mic. He had mentioned, is your platform protected from hackers? How would you know if there's if there's potential attack within attack on the platform? Uh, so I think he's just more so talking about the security of the actual. So when you say platform, Jason, I'm not sure if you mean the contract, because the contract is kind of the core of the, the value for the project, or if you were talking more so about, their website or something like that. I was just looking for a little bit more.
Okay. Yeah. So to to summarize the question really is well, what's the security behind this, right? And that's a really important question. It's really important that people aren't assuming they know the security of it, right? Like even though it might be this kind of smart contract or it might be on this blockchain. Well, first of all, it will be running on the Ethereum and Pulse chain um, blockchains, and and Ethereum's miners have done a lot already to secure that blockchain. So that's one part. The second part is from wallets themselves, different conventions that have grown over the years for crypto wallets, like with MetaMask, for an example. Good security conventions and good security. Good security is not just protecting something; it's also you not losing it. Like for example, having a 12-word phrase to write down instead of saving your data all the time. Like so Genius is piggybacking off of these wallet is piggybacking off of the wallet security, off of the Ethereum blockchain security, in the Pulse chain blockchain security. Hopefully, since Pulse chain will be new. But whoever you are, if you have Genius, you're going to have it on both Ethereum and Pulse chain. But then after that, how do we be sure of this? Now, when I worked in cyber warfare, I wasn't a vulnerability researcher or an ethical hacker or whatever, but I worked with many of them, and had hired different security officers in the past, and security people, technological people, and so I'd learned what to look out for, even though I'm not an expert at that myself. So how do you do this? Well, as a project leader and working with many other smart people, one, you want to be around smart people, but two, you've got to have a good design. You've got to critique your design. You have to peer review it. You have to have other people look at it. Um, Vulnerability research has to happen. There's been vulnerability research on our tokenomics, um, and I say like internal vulnerability research. And the smart contract is being implemented now, and proactively, we'll be doing vulnerability research on the smart contract. And when the smart contract is thought to be done, uh, I'm talking with different firms now to have a security audit run, like a third party security audit run on the smart contract, and other audits like a financial audit, and have some mathematical proofs. So this is what's being done, and these are good practices, and this is really something that all smart contracts should do in the future. It's a really good question.
Perfect. I love that, Jason. I appreciate. Yeah, he messaged me back after. He said he apologized not for clarifying. He said if you could jump into both, he didn't even think about the contract side. So thanks, Jason. Appreciate that, my man. I love to get you out with a question, and it definitely had been a while since we had heard from you. Robert, you let me know your timing, because I know you have a lot of things on the go, but I would love to keep getting questions in if you're available. This is the last day of the night. Great response so far. Love to get as many as we can in. So you just let me know your availability. I have a question here next from the community if you're ready.
Already? Okay.
Just let me know timing, and then I can jump into that one.
Yeah, no, I'll let you go. We're still good on
Awesome.
time.
Sweet. So this is from VOO Underful. So he
By
just
the
was
way, if I can
mentioned.
say something real quick, if I can say something like probably gonna be pretty good for a while on time. You know, I'm I'm good on water, food. I don't even need to eat food. I'm really very
Yeah,
happy to talk about
you
this.
do.
Very happy to help everyone.
I'm the same. My girlfriend gets so mad at me because during the day, like when I'm busy, I just don't eat. She's like, "You need to eat something." I'm like, I'm busy. I'll eat. I'll go on a feast after, and I just like stuff myself when I'm done, and I'm good. Go to bed.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get to VOO Underful. So his question is, Hex. So this was a relationship kind of key differentiators from Hex. So he had mentioned Hex has done, a 10,000x all-time high, and you guys do have a lot of similarities. Essentially, he's mentioned, why would I bother with Genius when there's already a successful project like Hex out there? How are you guys beneficial over Hex, and what would be your key advantages? So great question from VOO Underful. Thanks for that one, man.
Yeah. Sorry, if I may ask, can you hear me okay? Seems like
Perfectly. If
okay.
could you hear my question all right, or was I breaking up a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, let me summarize. It broke up a little bit, but let me just summarize. So it was, what are the key advantages versus something like Hex, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Well, first of all, Hex is great, and I'm a Hexican, and I have multiple 5555 stakes, and it does have great tokenomics behind it. It does have issues too. Um, one of the biggest issues that people are aware of, that the community is aware of, and I'll happily talk about issues that I've noticed a lot of people aren't aware of. Um, but one of the things that many community members are aware of with Hex is that the gas costs to end your stake are more expensive the more time goes on. So if you have a 2-year stake and a 1-year stake, the 2-year stake, there's a high potential of that 2-year stake costing a lot more like US dollar value. I mean, let's just assume that the Ethereum price or the Pulse chain price or the gas, let's just assume that stays static, that stays the same. Yeah, if you have a 5-year stake, it's going to cost you astronomically more to unstake that than a 1-year stake or even a 30-day stake. Excuse me. So this became such a problem that Hex had to exodus out of Ethereum for your average person to use Hex still, and that's why Pulse chain is coming about. Thank goodness, because Pulse chain is just going to be awesome for everybody. Uh, so so Genius, not only is Genius uh, being worked to be super super insanely gas efficient, um, but when ending stakes with Genius, it's going to cost as much as 90% less than the gas fees with Hex when it comes to claiming your stake. Let's say that, even though these are different terms and different mechanics for Hex or Genius, to the user it's going to look a lot the same. So when you're finishing your stake on Genius, it's going to be as much as 90% less in gas prices. That's like having a 9-year Hex stake and you unstake it in 9 years, and you had to mortgage your home or get an equity line of credit or sell your car or something just to get enough money to uh to unstake your 9-year Hex stake. Well, with Genius, unstaking 9 years worth of stuff um, could cost about like 1 to 1.1 years worth of gas, just for an example. So that's something that people are very very familiar with. Now another problem has affected Hex getting users. There's a lot of people in the crypto community that just don't trust Hex, and a lot of people don't completely understand Hex. But as they get to understand it, they just don't trust it. And I've talked with many people like this because I was evangelizing Hex, and I still evangelize Hex. And I'm talking to them, and they're like, "Hey, I checked out some of Richard Hart's videos, or I checked out some of these other videos, and I just can't get over the origin address holding half of everything. I just can't get over that." And while I've gotten over that, and while this or may not even be an issue, and there are reasons that help Hex with its origin address, the reality is, one, people don't trust it, and two, the design of Hex did not need to have an origin address to do the beneficial things that it was looking to do. And there was some philosophy behind that, and that's fine. So, like with Genius, for example, there's an origin address, and you can read, what it gets and stuff like that in the smart contract, and it's relatively very little. But you know, the origin address for Hex, it didn't have to be designed like that to do the same thing. Other complaints for Hex were that, especially with investors, is, well, hold on a second. If I do need to pull this out, I could lose some principal, or I could lose principal, or potentially lose all my principal. So with how Genius works, there are modes where you could not lose any principal at all, and there where you just lose your interest. For example, if you had to do things in an emergency. Likewise with Hex, if you have Quattro Cinco stakes, or you have 5-5-5-5 stakes, and by the way, anybody who's not a Hexakin is probably going to wonder what the heck I'm talking about, what the hex I'm talking about over here. But but with Hex, there's a lot of situations where you can't get any financial utility out of your really, really long-term stakes, because if you were to do anything, you would lose all your value, and your entire principal and interest would go to the whole network. So that takes utility away from it, really. And many technologies have been built recently on top of Hex to kind of work with that. They're not great solutions, I don't think. They're cool that they exist, though. But in the Genius world, for your quote stakes, they'll always have utility. There's an internal market for liquidating things and auctioning things in the worst case scenario. So that's some differences. There really are a lot more differences than that, and I would say these are super positive differences. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Perfect. I love that. Thanks, VOO Underful. Thanks for the question, man. I really appreciate that. So we have another one here. We'll get Ahmed in here for a question, and then I'll get another one in here from maybe Victory while we're waiting. So Victory, will you guys ultimately? So this is an interesting question. So Victory, Adeyemi, this question is: would you guys ever look to ultimately make the Genius token into a stable coin? And what measures are in place to make sure it doesn't suffer a tremendous dip? I think a lot of concern right now in the space with regards to just, what people have seen with UST and like Luna. So just what measures do you guys have in place to ensure like some of those bigger sell-offs or bigger exploits couldn't happen down the line?
All right. So, like, two questions here. And by the way, so one is, hey, what about the potential of a stablecoin? And two is, how is it preventing, serious dips, right? So, as far as the stablecoin part, well, when you have a cryptocurrency or a smart contract token, when you have one that is designed to appreciate in value and designed only to appreciate in value, if it does that very well, then really you're not going to care about it being stable, right? Because technically, then it is a stable coin. Well, it's preserving your value, but also amplifying it. So no, we don't have, like, I myself at least don't have a desire to get into the stablecoin world. I mean, I know Craig Sellers. He's the one who he founded Tether and was their CTO, their technology officer, and I don't know, like 5-6 years later, moved on. And I've heard a lot about the stablecoin business, as a business, right? It's very interesting and very cool. But I think something that's better than a stable coin that pegs to the US dollar, I think something that's a lot better is something that is preserving that value relative to the US dollar and growing in value over time. And so Victory, I think his name is, his question is great. He asks a great question on, like, well, what measures are there in place to make sure that big, tremendous dips aren't suffered? That's a great question, because in order to make a asset that only appreciates in value over time, you have to consider that, and you have to consider human behavior. So currently the best store of value, in my opinion, Hex, has also suffered from tremendous dips. right? And is there really something wrong with that? Well, I don't know. But the one thing for sure is when you're somebody who bought the top at like $1 for something, right? And the price is now like 10 cents. The person who bought the top and all of the people who bought, you know, anywhere above 10 cents, like a newer price, are not going to be evangelists for that. I mean, they might still be evangelists and say, "Hey, come on, buy the dip, etc." But people just aren't happy with that kind of scenario, and it's true, and it happens. So, so Hex, for example, when it's doing 100x, 1000x, 10,000x, when it's doing these, or double the price even, when it's doing these massive, insanely great gains, and when any crypto is doing these massively, insanely great gains, the reality is you have somebody, or you have people out there who have, they're not going to bring the price down a little bit with, a little bit of, relatively little bit of, money that kept buying up the price, or even large amount of money that kept buying up price. The people who are at the top of the price and who've been waiting for a while, their money has multiplied greatly, massively multiplied. So if they're selling, they're really selling a much larger multiple than what they bought at. So this turns into a ton of selling pressure, right? And I'm trying to speak as in simple terms as possible. Selling pressure, like a lot of downward activity, right? So the more the price goes up, it's almost like there's a multiple and more like energy for it to come down, just like with like the whole gravity thing, or or density thing, depending on how you look at stuff in the whole universe. So what was really important with Genius was that there were things in place to prevent that. Now, instead of going on like a lecture on here, I want to say that two things to look into the white paper, and that I'll explain now, is that um, you know Genius's AI and artificial intelligence, being that artificial intelligence, those are formulas that uh, react to human behavior and human activity, and the output of these formulas is something beneficial for the game, or for everyone, or for the opponent. So Genius's AI, it incentivizes user behavior to produce upward market trends. So it incentivizes users uh, to do things that benefit all the holders of Genius and upward market activity. And so that's where the white paper comes up with promise days. So Genius, you can hold on to it just like everybody else, right? That's not really any utility, but the utility side of Genius is basically making a promise to the network that you're going to hold on to X amount of Genius for Y amount of days. So this amount of Genius for X amount of days. And your promise, um, your promise, and this gets into something like the growing divorce reward, but your promise is valuable to the network. It's valuable because it shows the network that there will be less selling activity. Now that same mechanic exists in the hex world. However, in hex, when you do that 100x, or when you do that, when your holding of $1 turns into $100 or $500 or $1,000, and in the hex world where you have a promise to the network you know to not to not liquidate your now $1,000 from $1. In the hex world, where they call the staking and everything, you don't really have an incentive to not break your promise. Like in the hex world, there's many situations where if you were to break your promise and not hold something for 1,000 days, but instead hold it for however many days, there's many situations where that's going to eat into your principal by 80%. Like that sucks. That's like having, let's say, $1,000, and then you're left with 200. But with Hex's price appreciating so much, right? I may have started with $10, and then now it's worth $1,000, and dang, you know, all the penalties I'm going to pay by breaking my promise. Uh, Wait, I end up with $200 though, even though I get penalized like crazy. Well, heck, this is still worth it for me. So Hex didn't really do a great job at incentivizing its users to keep their promise over time. So people's promises on the Hex network are relatively valueless. I mean, they're still valuable, don't get me wrong, but they're valueless when people can change their mind. And this is true in the universe, in human relationships, of course, being something part of the universe, obviously. Human relationships is that we can always change our mind. And what makes something really valuable to us or to ourselves or to others is when we don't change our mind. Like that is pretty rare for a human being to stay on the same focus, right? Or something that is kind of the same focus, whatever. So Genius solves this problem. And if you're interested in seeing some of the mechanics behind it, one thing you want to look at in the white paper are a penalty counter, penalty multiplier, and even blackout days, and even the pumpamentals and burnamentals um, li- of liquefying. Wait, actually, I think I got the word wrong. Liquidating your Genius mining stakes.
When I chatted with Digital, I know that was one thing that actually came up, the wording on that, and we had been like, well, sometimes people are going to think liquidate is like a full sell, so maybe changing the verbiage on it or the positioning a little bit to be more of like a transfer or something like that. I think maybe would, to those that strictly are thinking financial terms, when you hear liquidate, kind of make sure that maybe that panic mode doesn't set in a little bit.
That's a good point. That's a really good point, especially if we're going to keep improving this communication, right? Like where it talked about like liquidating. It even mentions in there in the white paper, like, well, this is probably better to be said as like auctioning it or something. But really transferring it, auctioning it for transfer, is better to say because in since Hex came up, in Hex terms, really all you can do is nuke your stake, right? If the penalty is so high. Um, but Genius, you can transfer that promise to someone else who will fulfill that promise for you. And thank you, the word transfer. That's a better word to
Yeah,
use.
it's essentially like the when Digital was telling me about that component yesterday, the thing that came to mind was like the transfer of like a land deed or something like that, and like a title of ownership or something. So like that's why that kind of terminology came to mind.
Noise.
Sure. All right, so we did have one here from. We got one or two more. If you're okay with it, I want to get them in because they've been some really good questions and they've allowed for some good discussion after the fact too. So, uh, Greed came in. He said, apologies, I came in about 20 minutes late on this one. So if you missed it early, my bad. But he said, for me, non-crypto users are super important for a project of this scope. What is your real plan to attract those non-crypto users more from a partnership perspective, to allow them to see and showcase your real use case?
It's a good question. My real plan. What I do is, while I think about like the future of things to do, I'm mostly focused on the next best moves. And a lot of times the next best move changes. And it's going to happen in a world that's like constantly changing, right? And and the best chess players in the world kind of they have this mindset of, it's going to be better to make the next best move, really. You can't plan 5 moves ahead or 6 moves ahead because of the simple fact that you don't know what's going to happen. Um, so this depends entirely on the community, what the community plans to do. So fundamentally, it is make a great product, make something that is useful, and if there's utility in that, then it becomes more valuable for people. For example, right now on Ethereum, the smart contracts that are generating the most fees are the most valuable. Is it most valuable because it's generating the most fees? No, they're the most valuable because they're being used, and thus fees are being generated from that. Excuse me. So, um, so important. These are people that are starving for this kind of utility. These are people who have CDs with banks and they're getting like 0.5% per year at best, or people who have a savings account um, with a bank that touts itself on savings and they're getting 1%. They're like, yeah, I'm getting 1% or 1.01% or 1.1%. And so normally, non-crypto users, they could use the utility of this like crazy. Getting anything more than 1%, 5%, etc. People want, people want a better store of value, and that store of value industry is massive. Governments, financial corporations have been working to give businesses, large corporations, small businesses, and people better stores of value. So, what is the real plan? Well, right now, it's to get this great product out. It's to communicate it and find different ways to communicate it for different people, people of different backgrounds and different education. And myself personally, I don't know. I might be the front man for the first fiat on ramp, or I might be an advisor for the first fiat on ramp. Either way, I intimately understand crypto exchanges, how they work, and crypto marketplaces. I mean, it was like, it was a few years ago. I was talking with the guys from Paxful.com, which they're awesome. I love those guys. Uh, for anybody that doesn't know, Paxful is like a better local Bitcoins. For anybody who even knows what local Bitcoins is, it's a more realistic way for your average person to get cryptocurrency. But talking with them because I really understand exchange and marketplaces and how to help people get crypto, right? How to help people get it some way, whether they're working for it or they want to find out how to accept.
Did I drop or?
Oh, I think he was here.
Sorry, I just had something happen
Okay,
here. You
just
can
a
all
little
hear me
disconnect
though, right?
there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Uh, so when it comes to fiat on ramps and such, that's my expertise. I might go in that direction when I'm looking for something to do, or at least advise, or who knows? I don't know. I don't know.
Hey,
The one
Maurice.
thing I do know is my
Good.
passion surely won't go away.
No, it definitely will not, and that's what got me really excited. I think everybody connects with that well. So Ahmed, thank you so much for the patience, my man. Glad to see the mic popped on.
Hey, I, w- I was I was just enjoying this whole AMA. Honestly, like this one's this one's a unique one. I haven't seen one like this in a while.
Yeah,
I got a
it's
question
cool.
regarding like how was this project even born? Like how did you guys even come up with this idea, and how long did it take you to take this off the ground? Like this sounds like a well thought out project, not something that comes overnight. So.
Well, you're right, and thank you, Ahmed, for asking this. You're right. So I did talk about this earlier about how the idea came around, but this was maybe like 5 years ago, or a little more than 5 years ago, 2016, 2017. Was talking with multiple different, new ERC20s tokens, but also talking with different cryptocurrencies that needed help with, needed help with reaching an audience. Right? They could have all the marketing in the world, but none of that marketing mattered if their target, or if people couldn't get it in the first place, if they weren't able to get that token. And so so as I was in business and speaking with a lot of these um, blockchain foundations, I was very interested in all their tokenomics too. Now surely some of them were like just not interesting. They're obvious money grabs. And I stayed away from a lot of that because I wasn't interested in it, and it wasn't going to make good business anyways, and it wasn't going to change the world at all. But all the ones that were interesting, I checked out. But what kept happening over and over again in the crypto world was, how do you really even get people to use this blockchain software anyways? It's relatively slow, and and why wouldn't people use a non-blockchain solution, right? And a lot of that had to do with security and value. Like why would you use Bitcoin instead of using PayPal? Well, the security and value have a lot to do with it. Um, and even the fact that PayPal has human beings and hoops that you got to jump through whenever you need help. Bitcoin, the same thing, but ultimately you have the ability to be completely responsible for yourself and have all the tools at your disposal. But PayPal and all those things, a lot of times you're screwed. You can't even exercise your own will and responsibility to do what you need to do. So this is why people are going to use these blockchain projects, right, and products. But so the other thing that kept coming up was value. Another thing that kept coming up was, okay, this is a lot of people want to go to this because it has better value for them. So after myself realizing, like, wow, we have programmable money, why not program money or whatever to be valuable? Why not do that? Why not program it to be scarce? I mean, if because clearly, like, Bitcoin was great and great with value and better than other things, but clearly it could be better. Um, so after having a lot of those ideas and noodling around with it, and especially when talking with many other blockchains, I spent maybe 2 or 3 years just kind of meditating on the idea and communicating with this with other people, and then started doing a lot of hardcore research on this idea. A little more than 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, really, and then running into um, other projects and other products out there, seeing how they worked, and Hex was an influential one because oh great, there's this store of value that I'm looking to bring into the world. Um, it won't be the first kind of like it. I mean, Bitcoin, yes, um, and there's a lot of lessons from Bitcoin, and then Hex, great, a lot of lessons from here, and a lot of influence and a lot of inspiration of how to even communicate it, right? So, um, so yeah, so how did that's a little bit of the journey there, other
Yeah, but
than my own
like
desires and passions.
how long did it take for you guys to bring it up? Like
Implement the smart contract, or what specifically are you talking about, Ahmed?
like when did the whole thing start? Like
So I meant,
that's the idea. That's when the idea was
yeah,
born. But you guys like start the whole thing.
So I think so Rob had mentioned earlier that they had kind of kick-started about 2 years ago with the initial concept creation, and it's stemmed from obviously jumping into Hex and trying to figure out how that worked, and just seeing the opportunity to something like that and improve upon it is kind of where the concept creation kick-started, and the actual idea was around 2 years out.
hmm,
This is the first time hearing about
yep,
Hex
and
either, so I'll have to look into that one as well.
Yeah, you definitely like it's you should take a look at that one and then kind of see through like the white paper. And I would say the next best place to jump would be the Telegram channel as well.
I
Like
got that
it's a
right
really
away,
good,
man.
yeah, it's a really good vibe over there. It's just super positive, and it's in these tough markets, it's really nice to see. I will say like they said, a bit of a safe haven over there.
I'll surely check it out.
cool.
Thanks.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
appreciate the questions though, Ahmed. And we have one question here from Razor. So Badman Rays, he said, "Hey Maurice, can you ask Rob if he could jump into the mining a little bit more? I read that the token can be mined up to 14.5%. What would the overall effect on the token be if it's fully mined to capacity in the two modes of mining? And then what's the advantage of advanced mining beyond
being able to bid on auctioned mining stakes. So we'll break that into the two. So the first one was about fully mined capacity, and the last one was about the advantages of the auction mining stakes.
Okay. What is it? Break this down to a few things. And thank you, Razor. So mining, keep let's keep the idea of mining here really being, how do I mine? But let's change that verb to mean, well, how do I get some of these rewards? How do I get some of this value, right? How do I get some of that? It's like in early Bitcoin mining. It was like, okay, there's this, thing that's trying to be a currency, whatever. But well, hold on a second, I can get paid. All right, I'm interested, right? Okay. So so when we're talking about mining, let's talk about getting paid, right? And I noticed Razor mentioned, and this really stood out to me when he mentioned 14.5%. Let me just clear this up with the Razor that percentage is more something in tokenomics that doesn't have much to do with mining itself. So, Genius, it doesn't have some full mined capacity thing like Bitcoin does. Like in the Bitcoin world, and this is good to frame this. In the Bitcoin world today, you have an average yearly inflation of like 1.7%, right? And a couple years ago, it wasn't 1.7%. It was like 3.4%. And then about 4 years before that, it was like 6.8%. And then before that, I guess you couldn't really call it a percent before that because that was like the initial kind of distribution of 50 Bitcoin per block reward. So what you have here is with Bitcoin, it's about 1.5% inflation annually. And with Genius, it's 4.2% annually, only paid out to the quote miners, just like with Bitcoin, only paid out to the miners. And every day, Genius miners are receiving those inflation rewards based on the amount of Genius that they're holding and how long the promises that they made to the network to lock up their Genius. In the Bitcoin world, miners, they got to buy expensive equipment and use a lot of electricity. They don't have to make any promises or anything like that. And furthermore, Genius miners, they receive extra, well, let's say it this way, just like in the Bitcoin world, how miners receive extra rewards from transaction fees. Well, in the Genius world, the Genius miners, they receive extra rewards from Genius mining. They receive, the Genius miners, they receive extra rewards from other Genius miners breaking their promises or being or not paying attention and being late to finish. They needed to start or finish their promise, and even earn extra fees from auctioning that goes on for transferring a promise, right? So that kind of answers a little bit about the mining. And so there's no capacity with mining. And same thing with Bitcoin too. People don't realize there is no capacity for that, but there is an end game with Bitcoin that one day most of the rewards will be earned from transaction fees. And with Genius, there's also an end game that most of the rewards could end up being based on, let's call it transaction fees also, promise fees or something. And you asked about the two modes of mining, and this has to do with the mining, but let me just let you know that what are the advantages of things, blah blah blah. The only reason why there are two modes of mining here is just to simulate two different scenarios. So if you're looking at Genius like a banking CD, a certificate of deposit, you have an amount of money that you can lock up with the banking CD. You have an amount of time, and you get a bonus depending on the amount of time, right? And even bonuses depending on how much you lock up in a CD. But then here, the next thing is, well, what do you want? Do you want low risk, low reward? Because that's kind of like a CD. Or do you want high risk, high reward? Which can be whatever you think it is. It could be the stock market or S&P 500 or whatever. I don't know, maybe that's not considered higher. whatever. But so the different mining modes are just meant to simulate low risk, low reward. That's the simple mining stakes. And then the other mode is simulating high risk, high reward, which are the advanced mining stakes. What is the risk? The risk is whether or not you are going to break your promise.
Let me just circle back for an answer there, make sure that it's good. But I mean, from my end, that was
And I do gotta start go.
pardon?
Just mumbling to myself here, my friend.
Oh, I thought you said you had to start going. I was like, oh, okay. So
Yes,
Razor,
I'm start preparing myself while we chat.
Razor, that was great question.
Oh, that was a great question. Thank you for asking that.
So let's go here. Thanks, Ray. I just dropped you a quick note. Hopefully that was okay. And then the last one here that I saw is from Hod. So his question is, can you ask if you will use the AI in to maybe attract, people from the financial world, some bigger companies to start attracting? Do you guys have plans to push this to any VCs in the future? So his is more so about like, how are you getting into maybe some big companies just with the like detail and quality of the actual technical side of the project? Oh, I think we got you on mute there, Robert. I don't know if you're.
Could you ask that question one more
Of
time? I'm
course.
just having
Yeah.
a little
So
bit
he
of
was just
problem here hearing that.
No worries, man. So he was just curious. He said, "Hey, Maurice, could you ask if you will be looking to use the AI in the financial world? Essentially, like, will you position it to companies to attract some bigger investors? What's your plan to push this project and get buy-in from VCs, like venture capitalists and stuff like that?"
Okay, so the question is also, if I can paraphrase it, is, um, how am I planning to evangelize it in the future? Well, this, I mean, it's worth noting that any good decentralized uh, product or project doesn't depend on one person, of course, right? And so, what is going to keep people evangelizing this? Well, people, to say it simply, people do evangelize products that they really like a lot, right? Like Apple computers, or like really cool video games, um, a, a nice car, comfortable car that's good for the money, etc. So, as long as this remains interesting to me, and complex game theory does stay pretty interesting for quite a while, um, I will be evangelizing this to other people. Now, and just like with Bitcoin, like with Bitcoin, what's the benefit of getting a VC into Bitcoin, like in 2011? What's the benefit? There's no real benefit other than, hey, maybe they'll pump my bags and buy a bunch of this. But VCs are a lot smarter than that. So, uh, so really, it's a very cooperative kind of effort, where if you're interested in it, you talk about it, uh, and businesses of the future will be able to be built around this. Now, I'm not trying to skirt the question, but let me tell you two things that are like very important takeaways from this, and that has to do with businesses and such, getting other businesses, other financial world involved in this, right? Is one. So what we're doing today is we're developing materials to help these companies and people who are interested in this. It's still super early, so you're not going to see these materials next month. I mean, you might see some of them. So for one, materials like a press kit, where other companies can, see all the logos and stuff to communicate about this product, right? So that's really important. And also, you've got to give businesses the tools to work with things like this. Like in the Bitcoin world, one of the first tools that were really important for web companies was just that the companies knew how to use the Bitcoin RPC server. so that they could read blocks and know whether or not they got transactions. So the two things that are really important for future growth for this, once this is, once it's established that this is a great product, is really giving the community tools to help it grow, to help communicate with other people, to help spread that imagery, to help give other people tools to work with this. This, what I see in the future is I see a lot of banks bringing the best products, the best decentralized products to their customers. I see that in the future. And and so if a bank wants to be the middleman, because customers are still going to want a middleman. Sorry, people who are in the banking world are still going to want a middleman. They're still going to want to trust someone above themselves to do things for them. So I do, because of that human behavior, I do see banks in the future offering, and exchanges do this today. They offer people to stake on their platform, and instead of having to stake and take care of their own security with their wallet and stuff like that. So for that to happen in the future, these businesses need not only the community evangelists, but they also need the right tools. And thank you for that question. I sadly I do got to get going here, and I hope that question answers to satisfaction.
Well, that was a great
I
one.
think
So
it
we'll
does.
get the closing statements going, obviously, guys. I really love the feedback, the positivity about this project. We did have a couple
And if I
other
could
really
say,
good questions. Oh yeah, I was gonna just go for another
you,
10
you know,
seconds if you wanted to jump in after that, if that's okay.
sure.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, you guys had some great questions, great feedback, overwhelmingly just amazing positivity about the project and the idea, and more than anything, I think Robert himself. So you really impressed me. I think you really impressed the community. I've seen a couple of people said, I've been here every day. I've been listening to you kind of from since you started taking over the AMAs, and this has got to be probably the most impressive project I've heard of just from the actual plan and the founder himself. So overwhelmingly positive. I'm going to throw it to you for closing statements, but I just really wanted to say thank you so much and really love the presentation. I can't wait to see you around the community over there on your side in the future.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate that. Well, what I was thinking of with with future companies and such. I also thought about companies now, right? And well, utility now, utility of today. And what I did want to throw in there is that, while today there aren't like, fiat onboarding ramps, or there aren't other businesses, bringing that utility to users, since the sacrifice is going on today, this sacrifice event, and it's going on until the end of the month, um, and more than $50 has been $50 million has been sacrificed so far. Uh, one big piece of utility that is there is that with in the United States, with different certified public accountants, a lot of CPs out there agree that when you sacrifice, you buy a crypto token, so that's like the start of your like capital gains, right? Whether the value of the token goes up or down. But when you buy something like Legacy Genius, you're gonna have to track capital gains. But when you sacrifice that Legacy Genius, you're effectively getting rid of it, burning it, and not getting value, not realizing value for that. So when the sacrifice participants receive their airdrop of the official Genius token, when they receive it, it's not worth anything. So there can be some tax benefits here, some major tax benefits for the United States investor, and possibly tax benefits for other people in other regions. So this is a very timely opportunity, super timely opportunity. The Genius token itself, the legacy, the placeholder token itself, is very quickly climbing to $3.33, because it has been incentivized to do so. This is a great opportunity for liquidity providers, people who like to yield farm and such on Ethereum. This is an incredible opportunity for excuse me, this is an incredible opportunity for traders, even though I stay away from the trading world. But this is potentially, talk with your CPA, this is potentially a great opportunity to get an offset against capital gains. Just wanted to say that. And in a closing statement, no, thank you so much for having me here this is by far the best AMA I've ever done. There's engagement, there's understanding, and really that's a lot to do with you, Maurice. And thank you everyone. It was great talking here. Thank you for your good questions, and some of these were like super deep questions too. I appreciate that. The whole community appreciates that too. So thank you all. It was great talking with you. It was lovely talking with you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Rob. And you have yourself a great next call. I know you got a busy evening still ahead of you over there. So thank you for giving us the extra time. I'll send digital recording as well, so you guys all have it and can get that pinned up. And like I said, you'll see me around the TG.